Weisathier Hale. Before English was written using the Latin alphabet, that is, these letters, it was written using the runic alphabet, that is, these letters. When people talk about runes, they are generally referring either to the family of runic alphabets used by various Germanic peoples, or specifically to what's known as the Elder Futhark alphabet. That's attested as early as the 2nd century, used mostly by speakers of what we call Proto-Germanic. This video will be about what are typically referred to as Anglo-Saxon or Anglo-Frisian runes. These are attested throughout the Old English period in modern-day England and Frisia, and were used by, surprise, surprise, speakers of Old English and Old Frisian. First, we'll go through the alphabet, explaining the letters, how to say them, what sounds they meant, and then we'll read my favorite runic text, which is a little blurb about Romulus and Remus. Stay tuned. The word rune is pretty interesting per se. Our modern English word rune actually comes from Old Norse, but the word existed in Old English as rune and meant what it meant in most Old Germanic languages, that is, either a secret, a mystery, a piece of advice, or the actual letters themselves. In Beowulf, when Grendel is terrorizing the Danes, the poet tells us that Moni oftisat riceto rune rad achtedon What sweetverchtum celestware with fargrurum to fremmanne. That means something like many often sat, the powerful ones at council. They considered advice what was best for the strong-spirited ones to do against that horror. And here, riceto rune means like the powerful ones, the strong ones, to counsel. We're also told when Unferth, who is the Thule of Hrothgar, that is, he was an advisor in charge of knowing things. He challenges Beowulf in the hall, and we're told that he onbond baurune, which means he unleashed a battle rune. Now, practically, this seems to mean that he verbally assaulted him. However, the sort of actual lemmatic meaning of the phrase is very unclear to us, and we really don't know what the origins of that expression are. The biggest contributing factor to our knowledge of runes comes from an 8th century poem which lists each rune and gives some sort of gnomic explanation of the word associated with that rune. So, for example, we have Jar bith gumnahicht, thon god latath, hali helvnas kuning, rusan silan berchte bleda, bernomon darvum, which means the year is the hope of men when God allows the Holy King of Heaven the earth to give bright fruit to warriors and to the poor. So we have the letter itself standing in for the word Jar, and then an explanation of what the Jar, here specifically the new year, means. This would have been kind of like a wisdom poem that the average person might have memorized for recall in day-to-day life. So to use the Jar rune as an example, someone might have comforted their hungry friend in winter by reminding them that the new year was coming, and with that, more food. It also might have been something just known by the intellectual class as a memory aid for reading runes. That is, if they had the visual order of the alphabet in front of them or even memorized, they could run through the poem in their head until they got to the character that they were struggling with. I bring this poem up not because it's an end-all be-all guide to runes, but because it's actually a fairly perilous source of information. And I want to emphasize that we can't be totally sure of a lot of what I'm about to say. We can do good scholarship and we can throw out bad hypotheses, but at the end of the day, there is debate on this stuff. I won't get too far into any of that, though. A colleague of mine has made a pretty good video on the potential issues with using the rune poem as evidence, and I'll have that linked in the description. Okay, on to the alphabet. This is not going to be an exhaustive list because there are a lot of strange sort of hapax runes that only appear once or twice, have unclear meanings, and may have been one random person's invention, full stop. The runes that I'll cover here today are the most common, being mainly just the ones mentioned in our Old English rune poem, with 2 later additions. The first rune is this. This is feuch, meaning money, cattle, property. It produces the f and v sounds. This is ur, which is a word for aurochs, which is an extinct species of giant German bull that actually gets mentioned in Caesar's De Bello Gallico. This rune makes the U sound and sometimes the W sound. This is thorn, named after the thorn, and it makes the th and th sounds. This is os, meaning God, and it makes the O sound. This is rad, meaning the act of riding, found in compounds like swanrad, which means the riding of the swan. Rad makes the R phoneme, which was probably either the ra sound or the ara sound. Those are referred to as the alveolar trill and the alveolar tap. Might have made both, we don't really know. This is chain, meaning a torch, and makes the k and ch sounds. This is yivu, meaning gift, and it can make the y sound, the g sound, or the ra sound. This is win, meaning joy, and it makes the w sound. More often than not, as mentioned previously, you'll actually find for that sound in word medial or word final positions. This is hail, meaning hail, that is the form of precipitation, and it makes the h sound, the h sound, and the h sound. This is node, meaning need, something that is needed. It makes the n sound, not to be confused with this letter, which is often used in manuscripts to mean othe, that is or. The letter is borrowed from Latin manuscript traditions, where it stood for the Latin word for or, which is well. This is is, meaning ice, and it makes the e and I sounds. This is our aforementioned yar, meaning year, and it just makes the ya sound. This is yew, meaning a yew tree, and it can be the I phoneme or the ch and h sounds. This might not be entirely intuitive at first, but yew is the 10th century West Saxon form of the noun. It was actually probably once pronounced ichwas, which makes more sense. This is perth, which makes the p sound. We have no idea what the word means, but it seems to have some sort of merriment connotation. It might have something to do with pears, lemmatically, and so suggestions have been made that it could refer to some sort of game box made of pear wood. That's about as much as we can say. This I'm going to pronounce as elks, which probably means elk, as in the animal. It might have meant some sort of sedge, which is what the rune poem describes. It makes the sound ks. If you want to know more about this, I'll have another video linked by the same colleague who discusses it more there. This is ciel, meaning sun, and it makes the s and z sounds. This is Tiu, the Germanic god who loses his right hand to the wolf Fenrir. In Old Norse, he's known as Tyr. This rune makes the t sound. This is Berk, meaning a birch tree, and makes the b sound. This is Eoch, meaning horse, as in the Tolkien names Eomir and Eowyn, and makes the e sound. This is Mon, meaning man, and makes the sound. This is Lagu, meaning lake, and makes the l sound. This is Ing, the Germanic god whence we get names like Ingeld. It makes the ng phoneme. This is Eithel in West Saxon, which was once Uthel. Both words mean homeland. This makes the u sound. This is dai, meaning day, and makes the d sound. This is ak, meaning oak, and makes the ah sound. This is ash, meaning an ash tree, and makes the ah sound. This is ur, which seems to mean a bow, and it makes the u sound. This is eor, which might have been an eel. The status of this rune is pretty questionable, and it often just seems to be used the same way as yar, which just makes the y sound. This is ar, and seems to mean something like decay or death. Jakob Grimm thought it might have been connected with Ares, but that's pretty dubious. Either way, this character makes the a sound, typically represented by ea in the Latin alphabet. Two more later runes are worth discussing that aren't mentioned in the rune poem. The first of these is this one, which is called kalk, probably meaning shoe. This rune only makes the k sound to distinguish it from chain. This is gar, meaning spear, and only makes the g and ra sounds to distinguish it from yivu. These letters, of course, only became relevant once those sound changes had already taken place, so it's unsurprising that they aren't tested until later in the Old English period, when their inventors realized that there was a need for them. Okay, now we've gone over the Anglo-Frisian runic alphabet. Let's do some reading. Okay, this is the left panel on what's known as the Frank's casket, which is a sort of gift box probably made for someone rather important in Northumbria in the early 8th century. It has a couple pictures and then runic inscriptions around those pictures, which usually have something to do with the pictures themselves. This one, they're all mythological in nature, at least most of them. This one has to do with Romulus and Remus, and as you can see, there are some warriors on either side, and then a few wolves, and the wolf that is prone in the bottom of the picture, bottom center of the picture, has two boys breastfeeding from her, those being Romulus and Remus. Now, there is one problem with this inscription. As you can see, there are a couple gashes in it. So the left and right sides are broken, and then there's another gash in the top. It makes it slightly difficult to read. We do have a decent idea of what it says. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out what these letters are, but it would be tough to read it like this. So I've made a little bit of a reconstruction here and tried to restore all of these letters to their original form, in the hopes that this is making it more easy to read. So let's start. Let's just read it. So we start with the first name of one of these characters. We have our rad here. We have an os here, a mon here. So this is going to be Rom, which was the word for Rome. And then we have a win, an ak. This is our lahu, our ur, and our ciel. So this word sounds out to Rom walus. Now, Rom walus is an interesting way to write the name Romulus, because Romulus, you could just write it as Romulus. They've decided to write it as Romwalus, which, if you watched my interview with Ildred, you'll know that the reason they did this is because they're trying to identify Romulus as a Roman with his name. The actual two elements here, Rom Walus, mean a Rome Roman. That is, Walus means a Roman in Old English. That it eventually is where we get the word Welsh from, and Wales. But originally it meant a Roman, and that's why when the Anglo-Saxons arrived in England, they started to refer to the local Brittonic peoples as Walos, meaning Romans. But that aside, here we get Rom Walus, that is Roman, which is pretty cool. Our next word begins with this os right here, followed by a node, followed by dai. This is our simple ond, meaning and. Our next word begins with rad, and then we have an euch, so the e sound, then an ur and a mon. So then we have reum here, and then a win, ak, lahu, ur, and ciel. So another walus. So this spells reum walus. That is Remus. And here they have really changed his name to be able to fit in this walus suffix. So we begin with Rom walus and reum walus. Our next word begins with a tiu and then a win. So we have a twa. And then we have our udel here, which is so the word begins with tu. And then we have this yivu, which here has the quality of ya. And then after that, we have an euch, and we finish off with a node. So this is the word in Northumbrian, tuyen, which I might not have pronounced that correctly. In West Saxon, it's twayen. So if you know Northumbrian pronunciation very well, don't judge me for what you're seeing here today. Our next word begins on the right side with a yivu, and then followed by an is. So yi, this is in West Saxon, the ye prefix. And then the actual root of the word begins with this berk, so b, and then rad, and then an os here. So yibro is how this begins. And then a thorn, an ash, and a rod. So this word is yibrodar. So Romulus and Remus, two brothers. Pretty nice. Then the inscription turns upside down. So in a funny little way of wrapping around the image, it actually wraps around underneath, and the next couple words are written upside down. The next word begins with ak, but this is the a prefix. So the real root of the word begins with this next letter, which is feuch. So we have af, and then an udel, so afu, two day runes, two dagas, if I may. And then here is the ash rune. So this is a verb right here. Afu da. In West Saxon, a fade day, that is fed. So the preterite singular form of fade on to feed, fed. This next word begins with the heil rune and then an is and an ash. So hia, which in Northumbrian is the spelling of the nominative and accusative plural pronoun. So we have a fuda hia, which is a fede he in West Saxon, that is fed them. And then who fed them? We get the answer with the next word. We have a win, an ur, a laru, an is, a feuch, and that is wulif, which is a wolf. So a fudda hia wulif, the wolf fed them. So the next word then begins with this is and then neod, so that's in. And then we have rad, os, mon, ash, so roma, followed by chain, ash, ciel, tiu, rad, and is again. So this whole word is romachastri. That is, literally in modern English, we might write this as Rome-Chester, another way of writing the city of Rome. So far we have Romwalus und Reumwalus, Tuyen, Yibroder, Afuda hier, Wulif, in Romachastri. So Romulus and Remus, two brothers, the wolf fed them in Rome. These two dots right here probably mean a comma, and then we have two final words on this left side. Here, this begins with an os, then we have a thorn, a lagu, and an ash. So that is odla. In West Saxon, edle. And then we have the next word beginning with an ur. We have two neods, so un, and then we have an euch and a yivu. And this yivu here probably actually represents a sound like ch. So the actual transcription would read unneg, but it's probably unneg. That is West Saxon unnach, that is near, far away. So odla unneg, here probably unneg, that is in West Saxon edle unnach, far from home. So Romulus and Remus, two brothers, fed by a wolf in Rome, far from home. And that's all I have for you today on runes. If you enjoyed this, check out the rest of the channel. Kindly consider becoming a supporter on Patreon or subscribing. And until next time, Farafye Isunde.